What if I told you there was an NBA player who didn't care about rules, respect, or even basic human decency? A guy who threw elbows, tackled opponents, and flopped so hard he made soccer players look honest. He was so dirty that legends like Michael Jordan and Larry Bird wanted to fight him on sight.
Ulrich set the pick. Jordan lost it. Vinnie Johnson and Laimbeer just fired at Jordan. Michael doesn't like it.
This is the story of Bill Laimbeer, the dirtiest player in NBA history. You'd think a guy like this grew up fighting in the streets, right? Wrong. But to understand this, we have to go back to the beginning, 1957. Bill Laimbeer was born into wealth. His dad was a successful executive, and he lived in luxury. However, Bill Laimbeer wasn't some prodigy. He was spoiled, coasting through life until reality hit him. He failed Notre Dame as a freshman, killing his basketball career for nearly 2 years. And when he finally returned, he wasn't exactly lighting up the court, just 7 points and 6 rebounds per game. Scouts weren't impressed, and neither was the league. So when the 1979 NBA draft rolled around, Laimbeer wasn't a hot prospect. Teams barely noticed him. He slipped all the way to the 3rd round, 65th overall of the Cavaliers, just another name on a list. The Cavs never saw greatness in Bill Laimbeer because he wasn't exactly fast nor athletic, and had no interest in fancy post moves like the NBA's elite centers. Instead, he played his own way, knocking down jumpers like a guard and battling for every rebound. Cleveland hesitated to even offer him a contract, and by the time they did, Cleveland still didn't really see his value, despite averaging a solid 10 points and 8 rebounds as a rookie. When the Pistons faced the Cavs, Detroit's GM, Jack McCloskey, saw something different. The game was a blowout, but one player refused to back down. Cleveland's center battled like the score was tied, throwing his body into every play, outworking everyone on the floor. That kind of play couldn't be ignored. At the next trade deadline, McCloskey made his move, bringing in Bill Laimbeer to join rookie Isaiah Thomas. And in Piston, Laimbeer became a force.
If I say Detroit Pistons to you, what reaction do you have?
The cheap shot artist, with Laimbeer, when you say Detroit, that's what comes to my mind.
Not very many good thoughts, that's for sure.
Bill Laimbeer didn't start as the league's biggest villain. At first, he was a target.
Last night's incident in the 4th quarter in which Scottie Pippen took down Bill Laimbeer. After that play,
In his first full season with the Pistons, 1982-83, Bill Laimbeer was an all-star, averaging 14 points and 12 rebounds. But back then, his reputation wasn't what it would become. Early on, guys didn't just challenge him, they straight up punched him in the face. And for a while, he took it. Until one day, he hit back. Suddenly, the so-called tough guys weren't so tough anymore, and Laimbeer, he became the most hated man in basketball. By the mid-'80s, Laimbeer was the heart of the Detroit Pistons' infamous Bad Boys. The Pistons were a gang, and Laimbeer was their hitman. Every game, players stepped onto the court knowing one thing: if Laimbeer was there, pain was coming.
But Rick Mahorn goes in for the layup, gets fouled hard by Dennis Rodman. No problem there, but there's the problem. Laimbeer with the ball in Mahorn's face.
While Isaiah Thomas led the offense, Laimbeer led the chaos. His specialty: cheap shots, hard fouls, psychological warfare, elbows to the ribs, standard. Shoving opponents midair, normal. True talent was acting. He was a master of the flop.
Here, maybe one of the great floppers of all time, Bill Laimbeer.
The second someone touched him, he collapsed like he'd been hit by a truck. And the refs, they fell for it, every single time. The nastiness hit a new level in Game 3 during a match with the Celtics. Robert Parrish elbowed Laimbeer in the face, and when he got up, Parrish decked him again. Laimbeer wasn't innocent, but let's not act like Parrish was clean either. This was the moment the Pistons and Celtics became enemies for life. In 1986, Pistons GM Jack McCloskey made 2 game-changing moves, drafting cold-blooded scorer Joe DeMars and trading for Rick Mahorn, a tough, fearless big man. With Mahorn beside him, Bill Laimbeer finally had a bodyguard in the trenches. Laimbeer owned the boards that season, leading the league with 13 rebounds per game while efficiently dropping 16.5 points a night. But when the playoffs hit, despite Laimbeer going nuclear with 22 points and 14 rebounds per game, the Pistons still lost to the Hawks in the first round, a brutal reality check that set the stage for their ruthless evolution. In 1987, the Pistons leveled up. They flipped Kelly Tripucka for a two-time scoring champ, Adrian Dantley, and drafted two relentless enforcers, John Sally and Dennis Rodman. The result? A franchise record 52 wins. Bill Laimbeer was a beast. 15 points, 12 rebounds, and an unheard of 89.4% free throw shooting, an NBA record for a center. Detroit tore through the first two playoff rounds like a wrecking crew. Then came the real test, the Celtics in the Eastern Finals. Boston took the first two games. Detroit punched back in Game 3, and Laimbeer? He owned the night, setting the tone for a battle that would go down in history. Bill Laimbeer sent Larry Bird crashing to the floor with a hard foul. Bad move. Bird had enough of him. He tackled Laimbeer and started swinging, landing punches as the crowd went insane.
Laimbeer's on the ground and Mike Abdenal runs out and hits him with the smelling salts. And you know what the first thing Laimbeer said was? He went, "They throw him out?"
The refs threw Bird out, and with him gone, the Pistons locked up the win. But that wasn't his only fight. Laimbeer had been pushing Robert Parrish all series.
Scotty, how much of a personal thing is there going on between you and Bill Laimbeer?
We don't like each other. I see him out on the court, and I know every opportunity that he get at me that he's going to take a cheap shot. And I will let him know I'll do the same to him.
This time, Parrish snapped. He dropped Laimbeer twice. Somehow, he wasn't ejected, but the league hit him with a Game 6 suspension. Detroit took full advantage of his absence, forcing a brutal Game 7 in Boston. Laimbeer's mind games had already stolen 2 wins, baiting Bird and Parrish into ejections, but when it mattered most, Bird delivered. In a razor-thin battle, he dragged the Celtics to another finals appearance, despite Detroit outscoring them across the series. But the Pistons weren't just close, they were furious. And in 1988, they came back with a vengeance, more ruthless and dangerous than ever. The Detroit Pistons turned defense into psychological warfare. Under Chuck Daly's command, they tore up the NBA's unspoken rules with a 94-foot press, suffocating opponents from baseline to baseline. Other teams played it safe, jogging back and letting offenses set up. Detroit brought chaos, full court pressure, bone-rattling screens, and relentless physicality. At the heart of the madness was Bill Laimbeer, the league's ultimate villain. He didn't just foul, he made it hurt. Hip checks, forearms to the ribs, cheap shots in midair, nothing was off limits. And his signature move? Sliding his feet under shooters, daring them to land on broken ankles. He literally single-handedly made himself a very hated player. But the Pistons didn't care. They weren't in it to be liked. They were in it to win, and their brutality worked. And Bill, he knew he wasn't the most skilled player on the court. He knew his real weapon was his ability to get inside his opponents' heads and make them crack. By the time they were more focused on retaliating than scoring, he'd already won. And the media? They were his accomplices. When the Pistons came into a town, all the media would write about were the bad boys and how rough we played. Opposing players got caught up in the hype, trying to prove that they weren't afraid. But the second they focused on him instead of the scoreboard, Laimbeer had them. Game over. Detroit entered the 1988 playoffs with a mission to destroy. A franchise record 54 wins, the second best defense in the NBA, and a hunger no one could match. First, they steamrolled the Bullets. Then, they gave Michael Jordan his first real playoff beating, sending a message that the league was no longer his playground. Next, the Celtics. They were kings of the East for 4 straight years. But Detroit wasn't there to bow down. And Bill Laimbeer made that clear before Game 1. He walked to center court, stood over the Celtics leprechaun logo, spat on it, and smeared it in with his sneaker.
That was always the one that came out first. There's always a leprechaun out on the floor. I'd go out and spit right on the leprechaun, rub my foot in it, and then go down and make a big dunk. Away we went.
The Boston crowd was foaming at the mouth, but it didn't matter. Detroit ripped through the Celtics in 6 games. For the first time in 31 years, Detroit was the beast of the East. But there was one player who hated him the most. Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time. But before he dominated the NBA, he had one major problem: Bill Laimbeer and the Detroit Pistons.
After that play, Michael Jordan said that Bill Laimbeer told him that he would break his neck. Of course, all of that is rhetoric. But if the Pistons win tomorrow night, that would break Chicago's back, while the victory by the Bulls would have the Pistons looking over their shoulders.
The Pistons had a strategy called the Jordan Rules. It was simple. If MJ drove to the basket, hit him, hard, over and over again. And leading the charge, Laimbeer. Jordan would later say that the Pistons didn't play basketball, they played football. It wasn't just Jordan. Everyone hated Laimbeer. Larry Bird once threw punches at him. Charles Barkley called him a disgrace. Even his own teammates admitted he was ruthless. But did he care? Not even a little. He once said, "I like to be hated, I thrive on it." Even Michael Jordan, his biggest enemy, admitted that Detroit's physical play forced him to get stronger. In a way, Laimbeer helped create the Jordan that dominated the 90s. Bill Laimbeer was one of the deadliest outside-shooting big men of his era. While most big men lived under the rim, Laimbeer stepped outside and drained over a crazy 200 three-pointers.
Most improved player 2 years ago in the NBA and has also been an all-star one time. Laimbeer fires a three.
Turning the pick and pop with Isaiah Thomas and Joe DeMars into a weapon of mass destruction, and under head coach Chuck Daly, he mastered the art of inside-outside basketball. Defensively, Laimbeer was a rebounding machine, outworking and outmuscling everyone on the floor. Offensively, he played mind games, drifting to the perimeter instead of rolling to the basket, pulling the opposing team's best rebounder away from the hoop and opening lanes for his teammates to attack. His impact was undeniable. Four-time All-Star, 1983, 1984, 1985, 1987, 1986 rebounding champ, and anchored the Bad Boys as they bullied their way to back-to-back championships in 1989 and 1990. Bill Laimbeer wasn't just a player, he was a force. A 6'11" wrecking ball for the Detroit Pistons, he spent 14 seasons dominating the glass and getting under opponents' skin. From 1982 to 1990, no one in the NBA grabbed more defensive rebounds. He was a machine logging 79-plus games every season for 13 straight years, playing all 82 7 times, and stacking up 10,000 points and 10,000 rebounds. His Iron Man streak? 685 games was the 5th longest ever, only snapped by a suspension. But Laimbeer's career didn't end on the court. It ended in a practice fight with his best friend, Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah ended up with a broken hand. Laimbeer, shaken by the fallout and the reaction of Pistons fans for injuring their team captain, walked away mid-season in 1993 at age 36. His number, 40, was retired in 1995, and to this day, he remains Detroit's all-time rebounding king. The NBA is full of villains, but Bill Laimbeer, he embraced being a villain. Even today, his name makes old-school NBA fans shake their heads. Some call him a champion, others call him a disgrace. But one thing's for sure, nobody played dirtier.